Mistakes in FPL are easy to make, and I'm not just talking about installing the app and giving yourself stress for the rest of your life. I'm talking about mistakes that can seriously damage your rank this season. So in this video, I'm going to go through common mistakes to avoid to help you boost your rank this season. Let's get into it. First mistake that I've seen a lot already before game week 1, and that is overspending on defenders. Typically, you always want to spend more money on your attackers because they tend to score more points. And this is especially true this season with the introduction of defensive contributions. Because cheaper defenders tend to play in teams that defend more, they make more defensive actions, which means they're going to pick up more defensive contribution points, which means that the gap in points between the more expensive defenders and the cheaper defenders is going to narrow. Obviously, the defenders in better teams are more likely to keep clean sheets, but this is the Premier League we're talking about. All the teams towards the bottom of the table are still capable of causing problems for those top 6 teams. That's just how it is in the Premier League. All it takes is for one goal to wipe out that clean sheet, and when that happens, you then rely on defensive contribution points, which the more expensive defenders don't get as many of. I mentioned in my Game Week 1 draft video that Gabriel was outscored last season by Wan-Bissaka, which just goes to show that the 4.5 mil defenders, they can provide some value. I like to look at it this way: if you spend an extra 1.5 mil on a defender, it might score you an extra 20 points over a season. But if you spend an extra 1.5 mil on a midfielder or a forward, it could be 40, 50, maybe even 60 points more. Next up, we have a mistake that I guarantee everyone makes at some point throughout the season, and that is panicking when a player blanks. This is an easy mistake to make. You bring a player in for an easy fixture, that player blanks, and then you end up transferring them out the next game week, and you end up actually compounding that mistake. You just have to tell yourself that all players blank in games, even Salah, Haaland, Palmer, Saka, they're all going to blank in games this season. That's just how it is. And ultimately, if you're bringing a player in, it's because you think they're a good option over the next few game weeks. So just be patient. Points will come. The next one I think is the hardest mistake to avoid, and that is overthinking. You will be your own worst enemy in FPL, I guarantee it. Sometimes you just need to go with your gut. If you're choosing between one player with great stats and one player with great fixtures, what do? Well, at the end of the day, you just have to go with your gut. No one has a crystal ball, and there's always going to be a little bit of luck element involved in the game. So don't doubt yourself, be confident in your decisions, because ultimately doubts will lead to more mistakes and more frustration down the line. Next up, we have a mistake that I made last season, and that is taking too many risks early on in the season. Much like an affair, risks are fun until they're not. I'm still haunted to this day by Barco, Quansah and Martinelli last season. Barco looked like a great, cheap option, got loaned out. Quansah looked nailed on to start, gets subbed in the 45th minute of the opening game, loses his place for the rest of the season. Martinelli, I always knew was going to be rotated with Trossard or Gabriel Jesus at some point last season, and yet I still went for him. All those players just forced me into an early wildcard, which created more problems because I didn't have that chip further down the line. 90-minute players should be the foundations of any FPL team, and they save you transfers, so don't go for differentials just for the thrills. Next up, do not make a decision based on what you think other managers will do. If you think the majority of managers are going to captain a player like Salah or Haaland because they're going to score the most points, don't just go for a differential because you think there's more potential upside. Your objective is not to be the most differential, it's to score the most points. So just forget about other managers and just look at every decision with the aim to get the most points. Now, this mistake you should definitely consider when building your Game Week 1 team, and that is keeping your bench balanced. It's true that you don't want points on your bench each week, but it's also true that you're going to need your bench at some point throughout the season. You don't know what injuries or suspensions are going to occur, and you also don't know when they're going to occur, so at some point you will always need to rely on your bench to save yourself on transfers. So obviously don't spend too much of your budget on players that are going to be on your bench most weeks, but also don't leave yourself short-handed for when those problems might occur. Next mistake that I see people make a lot is focusing on the fixtures and not the player. Don't get hooked on players just because they're playing newly promoted sides. A great player with an average fixture run is always better than an average player with a great fixture run. This mistake is hard for me to accept as a stats-based channel, but stats aren't everything. Stats make suggestions, results make conclusions. Now obviously don't ignore the stats, instead subscribe to the channel where I post weekly stats and tips, but don't be blindsided by the stats either. If a player has shown that they are a bad FPL option, it doesn't matter what their stats are like. If they're not getting results, they're not a good option. Next up, don't make early transfers. It's easy to do as you want to preserve and gain team value, but there's always an injury you don't know about. There's always midweek European football that might affect their minutes. Information is always more valuable than an extra 0.1 or 0.2 in team value. Next up is a mistake you will see in virtually every game week in FPL, and that is chasing past points. If a player has just hauled, it does not mean that they are going to continue to haul every week. Look at each transfer decision with the future in mind, not the past. And the final mistake that you should avoid is leaving your team bias out of your decisions. We all do this to a certain extent, as we all have our loyalties. That's just how football works. But don't be that guy who just captains a player because you're a supporter of his club. Of course, this is fine if you just see FPL as a bit of fun. I'm not telling you what to do. But if you want to get the most points, it's probably not the best tactic. The amount of Chelsea fans I've seen with João Pedro in their drafts is just crazy to me. I think he's a huge minutes risk. Maybe I'm making a huge mistake by not going for him, but to me, it just seems like the most obvious quick transfer out, and it's going to catch a lot of people off, I think. So those are some common mistakes I think you should avoid. I've shared some of my mistakes that I've made, but I'd love to hear about your worst mistake in FPL. So let me know in the comments and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Game week 1 is almost upon us. I'm sure it's going to be a great season. I'll see you in the next video.